It's not often that I find a matching set of 6 dining chairs. So when I found this set of 6 Dillingham solid walnut chairs, I scooped them up, even though they were a little bit pricey considering how much work they need. The finish that's on here is in bad shape, so I'll need to strip that and put a new finish on. And this upholstery is not original, and I don't like it, and it's also pretty dirty. So that needs to come off. My original plan was to reupholster these in black vinyl on the back and the seat. That's how I've always seen these Dillingham chairs in the past. And coincidentally, I just happen to have another Dillingham chair here that's completely unrelated to this set. This chair belongs to a friend and I'm doing some repairs on it, but it has the original black vinyl back and seat. So that's what I was planning to do with my set of chairs. But they had a surprise in store for me once I began taking off the fabric. So look at this. There's evidence here that there used to be rattan on the back. Not sure if that's the right word, but like that straw stuff. You can kind of see it a little bit here, and you can see the forget what you call that. I used to know what that's called. The part that you put into the slot there to keep it tight. Well, that's interesting. I think that would actually be a pretty cool look. I think I'm going to go back to that look instead of the black vinyl. So these chairs originally had a cane back instead of the black vinyl. I had never seen these chairs before with a cane back. I didn't even know that they made them like that. So I decided to return them to their original look of a cane back. But first, I had to remove all of the upholstery and about 1,000,000 staples. This is going to take a while. I used an assortment of tools to get these staples out. Here I'm using I think it's a staple remover, or maybe it's a tack remover. I don't remember. But it worked pretty well. I also had these big honkin' pliers that worked pretty well, but I found that the hard edges were denting the wood sometimes, so I smoothed out the hard edges with a grinding wheel. Here I'm using some diagonal cutters, but the cutting edge has been dulled down, so it's not going to cut the staple. It's just going to pull it out. And some needle nose pliers come in handy. After many, many hours of work, I finally got all the staples out. And I still need to get the old spline out of the groove for the cane, which is going to be a big job. But before I do that, I want to strip off the old finish. So to get the old finish off, I'm using QCS by Stripwell. And I'll just brush it on, let it sit for a while until it looks like the finish is loosening up, and then I'll go over it with some fine steel wool to get all the gunk off. If you'd like to try QCS yourself, I have a discount code in the video description which will get you 10% off your order at stripwell.com. Once the finish was off, then I could start removing the old spline. And I've installed cane webbing on a couple of pieces of furniture over the years, and this was always the hardest part because it's normally glued in there. But on this first chair that I did, it came out really easily. It barely took any work to get that out, almost as if it wasn't even glued in there in the first place. And that got my hopes up, and I thought maybe the other 5 will be like this. But that wasn't the case. On the rest of the chairs, it was just as difficult to get that spline out as I remembered from the previous jobs I've done over the years. So, on the rest of the chairs, I used some steam to try to soften the glue bond. And I also used a spline chisel that I got from a local store where I got the cane. And they don't have a website, but you can get this anywhere online. I'll put a link in the video description. And this was a tough job. It took a while. I just tried to be patient with it, and eventually I was able to get it all out. This chisel was a big help in getting this spline out, but seeing as how I had 6 chairs to do, I did have to make sure I kept it sharp to keep it working in top form. So for some help in learning how to sharpen a chisel, I referred to a video from the sponsor of my video, Woodworkers Guild of America. Woodworkers Guild of America is an incredible online resource for woodworking instructions, ideas, and information. I'm happy to say that the first 1,000 viewers to click the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. Their videos are taught by professional instructors, and they're always creating new videos to keep you interested and inspired. Working on these cane-back chairs has piqued my interest in alternative materials for chair backs and seats. So I'll be checking out this video showing how to make a woven seat stool. And if you're a viewer of my channel, you probably have an interest in wood finishes. So here's a great video showing how to identify existing finishes, which can come in really handy when refinishing furniture. So remember, the first 1,000 viewers to click the link in the video description will get a full year of premium membership to Woodworkers Guild of America for only $1.49. Thank you, Woodworkers Guild of America, for sponsoring this video. Once I had all the spline removed, there was one detail that I still needed to take care of before I applied the finish. Some of the staples broke off when I was trying to remove them, so there was a little bit of the staple still sticking out of the wood. And I tried to cut that off as close to the wood as I could, but there was still a little bit sticking up. And I didn't want these sharp bits to damage the cane, so I took a Dremel with a little grinding attachment and just ground them down flush with the wood. And then I could apply the finish. And for these chairs, I decided to go with just a clear shellac. These are solid walnut frames, and the walnut just has a really lovely color all on its own, so it didn't need any stain. Although there were a few pieces that were a little lighter than other pieces, so it wasn't a perfect match, but I decided to just let it be what it is, because I like it like that. And shellac isn't the most durable finish, but it is easily repairable. So if anything were to happen to the finish, it wouldn't be a big deal to touch it up. And now comes the fun part, installing the cane webbing. I first let it soak in water for about 40 minutes, and then I could apply it to the chair and try to line it up as best I could so that it looked straight. And then I went to apply some wedges to keep it in place. But this was harder than I anticipated. It seemed like the cane just didn't want to bend and let the wedge in there. And that's when I remembered that I should remove as much of the excess outside of the slot as I could. So I cut off a bunch of it, and then on the top, I could remove any horizontal pieces that were outside of the slot. And this was easy on the top because the top rail and the cane were parallel to each other. But it wasn't as easy on the sides because the sides angle in as they go up, whereas the cane just makes a straight run up and it doesn't angle in. So some of those vertical pieces that were inside the slot at the bottom, by the time they got to the top, they were now outside the slot. Most of these strands are not needed. They're outside of the slot, so I can take them off. This one, because the side of the chair slants in like that, this one starts inside, so I need to keep it here, but then as it goes up and this slants that way, eventually it is outside of the slot. So right about here it starts going outside, so I can cut that off there, remove that. And then next is this one. Gradually goes in, and I cut it off right there, take it out. And then this one, cut it off about here, take it out. All right. Once I got as much excess off as I could, the wedges went in a lot easier, and then I could start going around and just pushing the cane into the slot. Once it was all in there, then I just needed to trim off the excess cane right below the top edge of the slot. And then it was time to insert the spline. First I put some glue in there, and I'm using hide glue here as a favor to anyone who has to remove this spline in the future. The hide glue is going to be really easy to soften with just some steam or some heat, and it should hold it in there just fine. And then I could insert the spline. And I did cut these pieces to length ahead of time. At the top, I did need to do a mitered joint, but the bottom was just a butt joint. I didn't have to do any miters down there. And by the way, I did not soak the spline like I did the webbing. I think one of the reasons you soak the spline is if you need to go around curves, it'll bend more easily. But these were all straight pieces, so I didn't need to bend it. So I just put it in there dry. And it seemed to work fine. So now the spline is all in and the cane is still wet and it's a little bit loose, a little bit floppy, but that's okay because I'm going to let it dry for maybe 24 hours, and by the time it's dried out, it will have tightened up. Next up, I started working on the seats. I noticed on one of them I could see a little bit of the original black vinyl peeking out from under the newer upholstery. So I was hoping that there was a chance the original upholstery was still in good shape, and I could just use that instead of buying all new upholstery and recovering these. So I got to stripping off the newer upholstery, and there were a few layers in there. And on the first two seats, the original vinyl was in great shape, which got my hopes up. Hopefully they're all like this. But once I dug into the rest of the seats, I found that all of them were missing the corners. So I just had to recover them all. Well, I wanted to go with the original look of the black vinyl. So I first visited my local independent fabric emporium, and they actually had just about every color of vinyl except black. So I had no choice but to visit the Best Buy Dick's Joann shopping center and see if Joann could help me out with some black vinyl. And thankfully, she had just what I needed. First, I had to remove all of the existing upholstery and a whole lot more staples. But this time, I got a tip from a viewer to try out this C.S. Osborne staple puller and these little pliers. And these worked great. They worked a lot better than what I was using when I was taking the staples out of the back of the chair. So this time it went a bit quicker. I'll put a link to these tools in the video description. And then I cut out a piece of 1-inch foam, and I just used an electric knife for this that I got in a thrift store. And I tried to cut it with just a little bit of excess around the edges so that when the foam was pulled over the plywood seat, it would cover the side or the edge of the plywood. And glued that to the plywood with just a little bit of spray adhesive just to keep it from moving around. And I got some cotton batting. The original seat didn't have any batting between the foam and the vinyl, but it did have batting between the plywood and the foam. I'm sure there was a good reason they did that, and by the way, I'm not an expert in upholstery by any means, so I just kind of figured this out as I go. And I decided just to go with batting between the foam and the vinyl because that's what I've done in the past and it seems to work well. And then I cut out my vinyl and got to stapling. And I've covered a lot of chair seats like this, but it's not something I do often. So a lot of time passes in between jobs. And every time I do it, it always seems to be a bit of a struggle. At least just the corners. The straight parts aren't difficult, but it's always the corners. For the corners on these, I just kind of trimmed off as much of the excess vinyl as I could and just did a lot of pulling and pushing and prodding and stapling until I got it so that I couldn't see any pleats or wrinkles when the seat was turned right side up. And as I was doing this, I took a look at one of the original seats to see how they did it. And I don't know, it just looks like a lot of pleats and a lot of staples. And even this isn't perfect. If you look at it from the side, you can see some wrinkles and unevenness, so I just tried not to get caught up in getting it perfect and just got it looking good. And now all I have to do is put the seats back on the chairs and they're done. And here they are, all finished. Well, 2 of them are finished. I didn't have time to finish the other 4 seats before I had to have this video done, but you get the idea. Thanks for watching.